Thanks everybody for coming out to help us honor the Going to Work Group's 2004 NBA World Championship. Let's bring out the one and only Mr. Big Shot, Chauncey Billups.
I just want to say it's so good to have the squad back together. Some of our coaches, the front office, it took a village. It took a village, and we're so happy to be back. We appreciate all the love and the support that y'all gave us. Obviously, when we got together, we all came from different places. As fate would have it, we landed here in Detroit. And we love where we landed. We love playing for you guys every single night. What we did on the floor embodied what y'all do every single day in life. And we're so grateful and so thankful. And I just want to say that we love y'all and we appreciate the support. Peace.
When you think of the biggest upset in NBA history, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? For some, it could be this.
Davis to go one-on-one, get into the lane.
Here's Davis. The greatest upset in the history of the NBA playoffs.
Or it could be this.
Butler. Long shot. Good.
Jimmy Butler has done it again.
And for the hardcore NBA fans, this could also be a pick that many probably thought of when we think of the greatest upset in NBA history.
Curry back to Iguodala, up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James. LeBron James with the rejection. Irving and Curry, one-on-one. Irving puts it up. It's good. Kyrie Irving from downtown. It's over. It's over. Cleveland is a city of champions once again.
Cleveland, this is for you.
But why are these moments so special to us? It is because we as people love a good story. Throughout our time, we as people can relate to the underdog. Quick question, you guys like movies, right? In those films that involve the protagonist, that tends to be the underdog, we root for that guy because no one believes in that person. It makes us want to see them succeed against all odds because we form a sense of belief in that person we see on screen. The same goes for the NBA. We love rooting for a team that has no shot in hell of winning, but we give them a chance anyway because maybe, just maybe, they could win. And when they do win, it makes their victory that much sweeter. And out of all teams that have been a part of some of the biggest upsets is, of course, the Detroit Pistons. And what makes this team the one that represents this title is the fact that they were once a heavily praised franchise that used to be the NBA's most hated team, and they were hated because of how good they were. The Detroit Pistons during the 1980s were the league's favorite team to hate, and that is because they adopted the persona that they are still known today as bad boys. They were a tough defensive and gritty team that physically dominated their opponents, and they did so by any means necessary. If they wanted to hard foul you, they were going to do it. If they wanted to pick you up full court, they were going to do it. And many teams and players during this era did not like them at all, and found it to be a huge thorn in many people's side. But that is what made them unique. They were a team that were willing to take on the entire league, and they were able to win 2 championships back-to-back. Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Bill Laimbeer, Dennis Rodman, Vinnie Johnson, and John Sally stamped their names in the late 80s and early 90s as the toughest team in the NBA. But like all championship squads, past and present, their reign was going to run out eventually, which we would see the team that would be bullied by the Pistons finally knock them off the totem pole as the best team in the Eastern Conference. And we already know what happened after that. During the time of the 90s for the Pistons, it was very up and down. Isaiah Thomas would retire, Dennis Rodman would move on to a new team, but the Pistons would be blessed with Grant Hill, as the Pistons wouldn't make the playoffs during that time, but they were always a first round out. They really became a team that had lost its identity with being this feared defensive-minded team to now being more of a doormat for other Eastern Conference teams to walk on all over during playoff time. But luckily, Joe Dumars, who was the one remaining player for the Bad Boys era, would retire in 1999, and in 2000 would be hired as the president of basketball operations, which was the first big chess move, as he would be the first piece to a giant puzzle that would get the Pistons back to the top again. For those who do not know, Dumars was responsible for assembling the roster and making all the moves to create the next championship contender that we know of today. And the 4 key players that were brought along are a group of guys that I would like to call. I'm going to be referencing a lot of movies throughout this video, so bear with me. But you know how in some films we see characters who are considered losers, misfits, outcasts, nobodies, people no one would even consider talking to or accepting into their group, and then we see them come together to try and achieve something they have been wanting throughout the entire film. That is basically what was being formed in front of our eyes at the start of the 2000-2001 season. Joe Dumars would work on a trade that would send Grant Hill to the Magic for an undersized center named Ben Wallace. And his career started by him being undrafted. No team wanted to draft him until the Washington Wizards took a chance on him. He showed great defensive prowess, but he wasn't really given the time of day by NBA fans. But then he showed what he can do in those seasons with the Pistons, winning 50 games alongside Jerry Stackhouse, who was the fill-in for Grant Hill at the time. They were a solid team, but them being knocked off by the Celtics in round 2 of the playoffs was a wake-up call that they needed some more change. And Dumars would bring in 2 more players to the team that would be great additions to the band of misfits. The first being Rip Hamilton, who was a solid shooting guard for the Washington Wizards and was a great 20 points per game scorer. And yet the Wizards, for whatever reason, traded seemingly their best player for Jerry Stackhouse. Now it seemed pretty questionable that the Pistons were giving up an athletic scorer who was solid at defense for Rip, but once again, Dumars knew what he was doing and had faith in the young shooting guard, and there seemed to be promise that he would fit right in with the Pistons. But with every group, especially one who are full of players that the league didn't seem to care about, there's always a leader, someone to carry the load for a team, who might have been the biggest outcast out of all the 3. This guy was someone who was a top 3 draft pick in his draft class, and he would never be given the proper opportunity to showcase his talents. He bounced around from teams like the Nuggets, Raptors, Magic, and T-Wolves. But Billups would get the opportunity to show what he could do with the Wolves in the 2002 playoffs alongside prime Kevin Garnett, who most definitely needed some talent on his team at the time during the Western Conference being at its all-time high. But the Wolves would not pick up Billups as their starting PG, which would yet again have Billups be passed around to another team, which saw him wound up with the Detroit Pistons, a team that already had 2 guys who were also like him, outcasts, people that were forgotten about in the NBA. So now the Pistons had their leader and a revamped lineup to try and start a new era of Pistons basketball. And they would become a better team as during the 2003 season, they would win 50 games yet again and would seem to find their identity as a defensive team. They would make it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, where they would end up being swept by the New Jersey Nets, and their run would end. But there was optimism, as this was the first time they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals since 1991. They might have been knocked out, but they were just getting started. Over the 2003 offseason, the head coach Rick Carlisle was fired by the front office after some disputes between the players and how the offense was not what the team wanted it to be, which is where they would hire Larry Brown as their head coach, who before had coached the Sixers, who had Allen Iverson, and he was so close to capturing his first title as a head coach. But we all know who they were facing. Debatably one of, if not the greatest playoff run in NBA history, led by Shaq and Kobe in 2001. So now the Pistons were given a new coach that could change the tide of the team's trajectory, and we could finally arrive at the famous 2004 season, which is something that I would like to call this season was one of identity. The Pistons were trying to find out what team they wanted to be, especially with their new coach. There would be some bumps in the road in the beginning, as they did start the season 16-13, but the team would get it going and would be able to become in sync and find their stride. But they still needed one more piece to the puzzle, the last puzzle piece, and that would come in the mid-season trade, where they would acquire the league's golden child. He was the prime definition of an outcast, someone who the league did not necessarily like, and they feared him. But he was indeed an all-star, and someone whom the Pistons could relate to and needed to help them become a title contender. The team that needed personality to help give a boost, and it was indeed the right decision. The style of play that the Pistons would play would be an unselfish one. Each player on the team could go off on any given night, and this was a team that was led as a unit. In NBA history, we usually have teams that have been led by the definitive best player, and everyone else played around him. But this team was an all-for-one group of guys. Larry Brown did an amazing job making this team a well-oiled machine. Detroit, towards the latter half of the season, would show the league that they were becoming a title contender. Do you want to know something that they did? They went on a 5-game streak of holding their opponents to under 70 points 5 times. Do you understand how hard it is to do that 5 times in a row? And guess what? They did it 11 times that season. The Pistons would finish the season 54-28 and be one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. and this was the start of the postseason. The run that the Pistons had to go on to get to the finals isn't looked at enough outside of the first round. In round 1, the Pistons would easily take care of the Milwaukee Bucks in 5. No one thought otherwise. But their opponent in the next round was a tough one, as it would be a rematch against the New Jersey Nets, the same team that robbed them of making it to the finals in 2003. So this was a more personal series, as this team went to the finals in the last 2 years, and this series was a dogfight. Detroit would take home both games, and it would be so in typical Piston fashion, as they held the Nets to under 60 points in Game 1 and to only 80 points in Game 2. They showed the Nets that they have clearly upgraded, and this was not going to be easy this time. But the Nets would rally back and dominate in New Jersey to even the series and make things very interesting for a Game 5. At Game 5, where usually the team who ends up winning takes the series after that point. And the final moments of the game were very tense, and due to divine intervention, we'd end up seeing this miracle.
Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing.
This game would go to multiple overtimes where we would see the Nets make it out and take the Game 5 victory. And now the Nets had an opportunity to close out the series back home. But Richard Hamilton would save the Pistons' season, as he was the hero of Game 6, forcing a Game 7. And then in Game 7, Detroit would destroy the Nets by 21 points, making it back to the Eastern Conference Finals, where their opponent would be the Indiana Pacers, the best team in the NBA, and one of the best defensive teams led by Reggie Miller, Ron Artest, and Jermaine O'Neal. And this series was another dogfight, because the Pacers would beat the Pistons in the first game of the series, and this was a sign that it was not going to be easy. But Rasheed Wallace would have one of the most iconic quotes in recent memory, as he made a promise to the world.
Y'all put it in the front page, back page, middle of the page, wherever, headliners, column 1 or 2, we will win Game 2.
Backing off.
We will win Game 2.
It's the handle. Tinsley. Reggie Miller. And it's blocked again.
Oh! What a block!
How did Prince get there?
What a block!
We talk about LeBron's chase down block a lot, and that is one of the greatest plays in NBA history. But Tayshaun Prince saved the Pistons in this game and had one of the more memorable moments in the entire postseason, and that gave the Pistons all the momentum to win the series in 6. While it was a grueling series nonetheless, the group of misfits were now in the NBA Finals and were representing the East for the first time since the 90s. But this was their final test, if they were worthy of being champions. This was... Let's take a bit of a pause for a second and talk about who the Pistons were playing against. They were playing against this team.
Shot 2. Bryant. To shot. Bryant. Yes.
Walker, the ball into Shaq. He's going. Oh,
Slam. Bryant. Oh!
Bigger and better than he has to be in the series.
Here's Bryant giving it up. Holding up.
the Los Angeles Lakers have made it 3 straight NBA championships.
They are potentially a team for the ages as they get better before our very eyes.
This was who Detroit was up against. But during the 2004 season, there were signs that the Lakers were falling apart. Kobe and Shaq's feud was at the highest it ever was. Kobe was dealing with personal off-the-court issues that very much became a distraction, and the new requirements of Karl Malone and Gary Payton proved to not be as intimidating as what people initially thought. But the Lakers proved to be dominant once again and made it all the way back to the NBA Finals for the 4th time in 5 years. And it seemed that everyone had collectively agreed that the Lakers had the series locked. Many news articles and sports fans had the Lakers being the undisputed favorite, and the Pistons were even lucky they made it to the finals in the first place.
We turn the TV on, we pick up a newspaper, 8 on Underdogs, David Goliath, they can't win. And we were just sitting there saying, you have got to be kidding me. These people are out of their mind.
So this was your typical David and Goliath story. The typical story where the little guy goes up against this big dominant threat, and many do not think that they have a chance at beating them, but they end up believing in themselves anyway. And it was very clear that the Pistons were the underdogs, the pure definition of the word. But regardless, we enter the NBA Finals. Game 1, the Pistons were in control for most of the game, as Billups was the leading scorer for the team, and the Pistons were harassing the Lakers, especially Kobe, as Tayshaun Prince was playing amazing defense. Game 2 was about the same thing again, but the difference was Kobe ended up saving the Lakers by forcing overtime and winning the game, as the Pistons had many key players who were in foul trouble. So the series was now tied at 1-1 and was going back to Detroit, and back then the finals was a 2-3-2 format. The Lakers had to win 3 straight games in the Motor City to win, but the Lakers would never make it back to Los Angeles. The Pistons for 3 straight games would torment the Lakers every single time they played, and they played with them psychologically. Shaq and Kobe were at their breaking points. Kobe especially had the worst series of his life. The Pistons knew how to exploit Kobe's weaknesses. They knew that how badly he wanted that Finals MVP, and they used that to their advantage to make Kobe shoot his team out of the game. They let Shaq dominate. They let Shaq get all the touches so that Kobe would get frustrated, according to Chauncey Billups himself, as he knew what they needed to do to beat the Lakers. Detroit rallied together and played team ball and were collectively running as a well-oiled unit. Rip, Billups, and Rasheed were the offensive weapons during this series, and Ben Wallace would constantly harass Shaq, especially in the closeout Game 5. And the underdogs, the misfits, the losers, were now winners and the kings of the NBA.
But the Detroit Pistons have just shocked the Los Angeles Lakers 100-87 to win the NBA title.
Against all expectations, but because of hard work, very hard work, and teamwork, I'm delighted to congratulate your 2004 NBA champion Detroit Pistons. Congratulations, and here's the trophy.
The Pistons should have never even been in this situation. In a perfect world, the Lakers would have probably swept them, and Detroit would have been sent home to another finals loss. But this team was able to defy all the odds and pull off the greatest upset in NBA history. Amongst all of the finals matchups that were upsets, the Pistons to this day are still ranked at the top of that list. Joe Dumars was able to craft the perfect system of players that fit their role perfectly, and Larry Brown was able to finally get a championship against a team that robbed him the first time and rallied a group of NBA rejects that no one wanted and molded them into champions, and to this day are still remembered as legends in the city of Detroit. Chauncey Billups and Ben Wallace, 2 guys who used to be known as nobodies and was never given a proper home, now are Hall of Famers and one of the best to play for the 2000s. Richard Hamilton, one of the best 2 guards in the 2000s as well, and had multiple moments of stardom. Rasheed Wallace, the league's bad boy, became the team's secret weapon. And Tayshaun Prince, a scrawny guy who people did not think could guard the best guys, but was able to do so in the most amazing fashion, and took on the task that no one dared to. So again, I ask you this question: why do we love an underdog story? Why are these moments so special to us? This is the reason why.